Thank you again, everyone, for joining. My name is Connor Kitko with the YCharts team, and I'm excited to have with me today Nick Maggiulli. Nick, how's your Thursday going?
Going great. It's 80 degrees here in NYC, so excited for better weather and very bullish on the summer. Things are opening up. So
awesome. Bullish is the sentiment of the webinar today, everyone. Some quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can use that Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get to those during our Q&A session at the end of the call. However, if we're not able to, YCharts will be happy to follow up and get your questions answered. YCharts will also be sending a recording of today's session to everyone attending. So if you're on the call, not to worry. And additionally, if you want to check out our YouTube channel, we upload all of our webinar replays to YouTube, plus a ton of other great video content that you can find there. So with that, we'll get started. And Nick, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and yourself?
Yeah, so I am the creator of dollarsandData.com, which is a data-focused personal finance blog. And I'm also the chief operating officer at Ritholtz Wealth Management. So in context of YCharts, that kind of gives me I sit in this unique place where I use it for personal things. I use it for blogging, just for data exploration. And I also use it as a professional wealth manager as well. So that's one of the cool things about YCharts is there's a lot of different functionality depending on what you do. And I think that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is how, depending on exactly what type of things you might need, there's a YCharts solution for that.
Yeah. And just to echo what you said, lots of different use cases that we'll be covering today. So if you are a wealth management professional, you're a personal investor, or maybe you want to start your own investing focused blog and compete with Nick here, you can hopefully pick up some good tips and tricks along the way. As our title suggested, today we are talking about this idea of YCharts as a sandbox. And what we mean by that is you can upload data to the tool, manipulate it, add it to a portfolio, and really just let your imagination run, all in a low risk testing environment before actually, committing dollars to any ideas. So just to run through this agenda really quickly, we're going to talk about building and testing those ideas on the platform and how Nick, runs experiments for his blog or other purposes. Nick will also then show us how he tracks his own personal portfolio in YCharts and, keeps his thumb on his success or failures. And then finally, Nick will share a little bit about exporting data sets and just exploring a fund or a stock, any ticker that you hear about, how you can leverage YCharts to really educate yourself on those topics. So now we will jump into the tool and we'll get started here. First, we're going to talk about exploring and testing new ideas. Before I let Nick run, I'm just going to show you really quickly. I'm starting on my YCharts dashboard, really great view of the market in the form of watch lists and charts. But I'm going to click Tools and then Custom Securities here. This is the first YCharts tool we're going to talk about that Nick leverages to build these experiments. And just to quickly show you how easy it is, I'm going to click Create New. Give this a name, and you're just telling YCharts what you want this security to be known as. You can enter a brief description and associate a benchmark with this custom security. And then once you try to upload some data, you have the option to upload in a couple different data formats. And one that we just added as of last night is actually any return period, any level period. So if you have sparse data or inconsistent data, YCharts is now smart enough to ingest that and format it alongside any other security on the platform. But here I'm going to quickly just show you upload data. I'm going to select monthly levels. And then I can drop in this file here. YCharts says your file's in the correct format. And then here we go. All of my data that I just uploaded is right in here automatically. But Nick, you have a few use cases for which you leverage custom securities. And why don't you just run us through those, starting off with this Dow daily historical data?
Yeah, so I think the big thing here with custom securities is it really basically YCharts has handed over the keys to their to the kingdom, so to speak. So you can just upload anything you want in there. So I really use it as a time saver. So if back in the past, if there was data that, for example, YCharts has Dow data, daily data going back to 1930. But let's say I want to do some sort of analysis that requires like 100 years of data. Let's say I want to go from 1920 to 2020, right? And I have that data. I can just upload that straight into YCharts. You can upload any data you want and then run it alongside another data series. And the reason I like that is just it's super simple and super easy just to have something in there, and you can just work with it quickly instead of going to Excel, creating the charts manually. I'm now utilizing YCharts a lot more just to save time. So in terms of Dow Daily, you can see like it's just daily data. If you want to look at like volatility measures, there's all sorts of stuff you can do with this. But yeah, it's very simple to just get data in there and then compare it to whatever you want. So I think with that being said, we can actually talk about some more personal data than the Dow Daily data. And that's my actually monthly page views over the last 3 years on my blog. So this is just a data series. So it jumps around like this because it's monthly. And it shows monthly page views changing over time over the last 3 years. And what's really interesting, I think this is kind of a cool thing that you guys can actually see in the data. So yeah, let's go to fundamental chart. And let's add the VIX, or let's do the last 3 years, I think.
Sure. 3 years.
Well, so yeah, this is the last 3 years. This is a percentage change in views, but if we add the VIX, I think you'll see something pretty interesting. So yeah, get rid of that level. Okay. So can you move down a little on the chart? I think so I can see the whole thing.
Are you unable? I'm sorry, I cannot scroll down any further. See the bottom.
Okay. Well, maybe it's just my view. Okay. But either way, what you can see here is you see my monthly page views, and then that's the VIX over time. And so you see, like, as coronavirus started to hit, people started viewing investment blogs. And this is just not my blog. Like, a lot of the Ritholtz blogs saw the exact same thing. And it's really interesting because you can see that surge right there, and you can see page views dropping as the VIX kind of calmed down, and the world wasn't going to end anymore. So it's really interesting to see stuff like that. But this is something you could quickly visualize in YCharts. And I thought it'd be like a fun example to show you guys. As they say, the higher the VIX, the higher the clicks, or something like that. So it's a little blogging thing. But on a more serious note, so this is just like a fun example I wanted to show. In addition to this, though, you can actually use custom securities to eventually like test other things as well. So this, for example, is just a Bitcoin security, which it's just the price of Bitcoin. I used YCharts data and I just loaded it back in because you can't use currency pairs when you're doing testing. And my question with this, I was just like, okay, I want to put the Bitcoin data in there. And the question is like, how would a like 60-40 portfolio perform compared to a 60-40 portfolio where I have 2% Bitcoin? So let's say I took it was really a 59-39, right, instead of a 60-40. So I'm now using a different tool in this case. So can you go to tools real quick and just model portfolios, just so I can show people? Yeah. So within model portfolios, this is now a tool where you can like create a portfolio. You can put in exactly, the weight. So let's actually do 60-40 first. Can we just go to the edit, I think, real quick? This will make it a little bit easier to see. Or yeah, we can just look at holdings. It's fine as well. This will just show like you can put in like, okay, so I have like 60% SPY, 40% just a bond fund. And then I made a variation of this where I did the exact same thing, except I had 59% SPY, 39% bond, 2% Bitcoin based on that security. So based on that, now we can look at this thing here. Now, this is that same portfolio. I just added 2% Bitcoin. You can see it here, the same exact holdings. But what's really cool, click performance real quick. I can actually I'm showing the performance of this portfolio versus just the 60-40, right? So these are the same portfolio. One just has a 2% allocation to Bitcoin over time. Now, obviously, Bitcoin's risen a lot in price over this time period, so the performance is obviously going to be better. So no matter how you look at it, I mean, performance is basically always going to be better. But what's also interesting is you can now compare this portfolio across a lot of other metrics, right? So let's go to fundamental chart real quick. I think this will kind of show some other stuff as well.
For sure.
So let's do a percentage off high on the data format on the left side. Yeah. So this is cool because now you can see, like, obviously the drawdowns are similar, at least over the last year. They haven't really changed much, but let's go back over like the last 5 years. And you can see, yeah, having 2% Bitcoin is going to increase your drawdowns a bit in certain periods, and, up to a couple percentage more. points more, but it's definitely based on this historical data set. You can see why having it in the portfolio would have definitely been worth the risk of holding, right? Even in a very, very small allocation. So this is just an example of an idea you can test. Obviously, I have no clue what's going to happen with Bitcoin going forward. I have no clue if it's ever going to pass its old highs, if it's going to way surpass them, who knows? But this is just a quick way of you saying, hey, I have this model portfolio and I want to just tweak it a little bit and test it, right? In theory, you can make as many model portfolios you want and then test them all. For example, other portfolios I have in here, I have like the permanent portfolio, I have the all-weather portfolio, and I like looking at them over time just to see like how they're doing relative to the S&P. And it's really just indicative of, what's going on in markets, and it's really interesting. So that's kind of how I use custom securities, is just like putting that data in there and, testing it in different ways. So that's probably the big one I would discuss. Yeah.
And one point just to clarify, as Nick mentioned, we do have Bitcoin price data in YCharts. It's formatted, however, as a security pair compared against the USD. So then Nick exported that data, created a custom security, which allows him to put it into a portfolio. And then that's how we're able to model this experiment here. And, you can imagine a lot of other things like NFTs or maybe fine art, different things that have suddenly come into the investment sphere. You could find some data for those types of investments, upload it to YCharts, and run a similar analysis to this one. So very cool experimenting going on here with custom securities and model portfolios together. So speaking of portfolios and testing how they perform, we're going to transition over to the next section on our agenda, where Nick is going to talk about using YCharts to track his own personal portfolio. I would like to quickly do another brief demonstration before Nick jumps in, but I'm going to go back to model portfolios. And this is my list view of all the portfolios that are in my account, but I'll click create in the top right corner and then blank dynamic model portfolio. So what you can actually do is upload your historical allocation changes to YCharts, and you can see how the performance and other metrics have changed as your holdings have changed. So this is a really great way to get a very specific view of that performance over time. And I'm just going to show you, it's a similar data upload to what we did with custom securities, but this time I have an Excel file, very simple, 3 columns. As of 1984, I was 100% stocks. In 99, we went 80 stocks and 20% to bonds, and then slowly diminishing our stock allocation over time. Now, when I upload this file, YCharts says I'm in the correct format, and when I click submit, I can see that historical allocation change for each of my holdings. Now, Nick, we're going to talk about your portfolio here, and you actually did this using just the traditional model portfolio. So no historical allocation changes, but you're still getting all of those great portfolio analytics, things like performance, risk metrics, allocations. So Nick, what are the benefits in your opinion of having your portfolio in YCharts?
Yeah, so I really like this tool. I mean, I specifically think dynamic model portfolios is really cool if you have your data. Because I once did this Twitter poll where I was like, hey, how many of you guys actually even know your investment performance? Like, how have you actually done compared to the market? And most people don't know. I think it's like 60-70% of people have no idea, right? And some people don't care, but it's interesting to track and just to know, even if you're like an index investor or you're mostly passive, it's still interesting to know how you've done, and right, looking at kind of what might be in your portfolio and looking at that over time. And so if you have that data, it's really cool to like put in that dynamic model portfolio and you can track it, which is interesting. So I have like a rough allocation. And so I tried to replicate that here. So even if you don't have the exact weights and percentages at every point in time to get perfectly there, you can like estimate. And that's what he was showing here with some of the holdings. Is like a rough estimate of kind of what I've held over time. Like, for example, it's showing 5% gold right now, but I don't own any gold. I owned it for like a long time, many years ago. Before I was blogging and everything. So I'm just leaving it in there to kind of like say, hey, this is kind of close enough to what I've been doing. I obviously own some Bitcoin now, so that would have to be in there, but it's not perfect, but it's probably close enough. And what I think is really cool is like, if you go to, for example, performance, or you go to a fundamental chart, we can look at how how this is done over time, right? So for example, here's the 60-40 over the last 5 years, and they're basically identical, which is interesting, even though I have far more equity exposure, right, in my portfolio. And the reason is because, like, I have far less, S&P 500 US stocks. I have far more international stocks. And as a result of that, I've underperformed those particular equities, but I've also outperformed bonds. So that's kind of how you see, it's interesting to kind of see this type of performance stuff over time. And so like for you, I use this and I track, like, basically this is roughly kind of what I'm looking at. It's useful to know. And in the future, I will probably edit this and, you actually use dynamic model portfolios and like edit my allocation over time. I think it's just cool because it's illuminating of like knowing how you're doing and, what type of returns am I getting every year. That's like interesting. So can you go back to performance? And it's going to show the bar charts.
Sure.
Scrolling down a little bit, like, for example, just like a 10-year, like even over the last 10 years, like this portfolio is done, 8.7% a year, right? And so like all of the projections I use personally, I try to use a 4% real return. So let's say 6 to 7% nominal. So like I'm outperforming what I would even expect in like any sort of financial planning stuff that I do personally, right? So, and that's great. And maybe it's because we're in a bull market and this is all going to come crashing down and that number is going to get pulled down. Who knows? But either way, it's cool to kind of see that information.
Definitely.
But that's the main stuff I use it for. Are we going to ask?
I was just going to add some more other, functionality here with model portfolios, some upside downside capture. So Nick is benefiting from the upside of his investments and a little bit protected from the downside as well as of late. When we look at the allocations tab, everything from your stock style exposures up here, stock sector exposures, bond maturity exposure. So whether it's your personal portfolio or the portfolio of a client of yours, you're just getting a lot of great analytics that you probably won't be seeing in, a brokerage-based tool or something of that nature. One more functionality just for any of the wealth managers on the call. We have this report function for any portfolio that you have in YCharts. It'll ask you for a couple brief pieces of information, like the client you're creating that report for. But now I get this really high quality printout PDF base that's shareable with clients, all that same data that we just saw on the front end of the platform. And, great to take this and show off your strategies to whoever is curious. Awesome, Nick. Thank you for that. Let's talk, we've talked about both this building and testing ideas within YCharts, and we've also added the tracking your own portfolio and just knowing what you own, knowing your exposures and your allocations. The last thing we're going to talk about, I know that you're active on Twitter. There's lots of great things going on in the FinTwit community, but there are also a lot of people on Twitter that have very strong opinions, right? So let's talk about using YCharts to educate yourself about things that you might be hearing from others or from the news, rather than taking the internet's word for it, right? So Nick, we're going to talk a little bit about time series analysis, and I'll flip over to time series now, and you can tell me one of your favorite workflows here.
Yeah. So in terms of I think a lot of stuff on Twitter is, there's I remember, for example, I wrote a post, I think it was like 3-4 weeks ago, called "Why Are We Panicking Again?" And basically like everyone was panicking on Twitter. And I was like, what's going on? Like the S&P 500 is down like less than 1%, if that. And I realized, it was all these meme stocks and things that were crashing, these tech stocks, Zoom was crashing, all this stuff. And I was like, these are the people that own this now. So you realize that. What's really cool is what I like to do when I'm like doing these types of analyses is I just like to get the raw data sometimes. So, I obviously program a lot. And so if I want to like do certain types of analyses, like I think YCharts is also useful, just to like provide that data ingest on top of saving me time when I'm creating charts and things like that. There's certain things that are a little bit more complex or a little bit more beyond just this, that you wouldn't really have a custom tool for that. So you have to kind of you have to program it yourself, right? So that's what I use time series analysis for. So, for example, one of the things I've done a lot of is just like looking at all the stocks in the S&P 500. So very simple. You would go into lists, indices, S&P 500, you'd submit that. And now it's automatically going to have, all 505, I think it's 505 of these stocks in the S&P 500. All of them are going to be in there. You can look up whatever daily returns. You can look up daily levels. You can look up market caps. That's something I've used. anything like that, now you have that data and you can go back. So for example, right in this particular summary tab we're looking at, we're just looking at, 2021, the full year. So we can like grab every stock. We can say, okay, who are the best performers or worst performers? Very easy to then, grab that data, but you can go grab that data as far back as it's available for all these stocks, right? So I think that's another big piece of YCharts is not only do they create a user interface that's really friendly, a lot of portfolio analytics, but even if there's something that you really want to go above and beyond with, you can really use this tool to kind of get you to that point. So in terms of talking, I use this when I'm trying to analyze like what the market's doing relative to what I'm seeing on social media or what people are saying. And so it's really good to have the full data set here where you can kind of come to your own conclusions, basically.
Right. And just to interrupt here quickly, Nick, a great thing about this too is, as Nick was saying, when you want to export this data for Excel or use elsewhere, you can pick your dates, you can say what frequency you want it at, a ton of different options here. And what this does is help you to, format this data properly before you load it up into Excel. So you're not spending all that time reformatting things. You're just getting data exactly how you want it. I click export and you can export data, just flat numbers into a CSV. Or if you're using the YCharts Excel add-in, these numbers will be linked to our platform. Every time you open that book, your figures will update, which is really powerful.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the other things I also use this for, on top of just like looking at indices as a whole, is also just like looking at individual funds. So for example, when I was talking about that post I wrote, why are we panicking again? I was like, okay, well, what type of stocks are going down? And I said, well, let's just see what's in ARK, right? I think that's one of the biggest funds out there. So that fund's probably got a lot of stuff in there. And lo and behold, that was the exact type of stuff that was, as you can see, back in, late January or mid to late January, that's where things are starting to crash a little bit.
Right.
But what's really cool about this, you can see all the holdings within a particular fund, or at least it'll show you the top 25, which in this case is like most of the weight of the fund, which is pretty cool. You can like see all the holdings there. And then in addition, you can save the holdings of any fund to a watch list, right? So once you have them in a watch list like this, then you can also you can like subset. So if we're going back to the time series here, we have the S&P 500. Right. Let's remove that out of there. You can get rid of that. You can then now add in that from a watch list. I think it's under my list, right? Yeah.
Correct. Watch lists. And then we'll find holdings for ARK right there. And here we go.
Oh, it even gives an average. Oh, that's cool. I haven't noticed that before. That's great.
Yeah. So
it's like an equal weight. Yeah.
You can just do a couple different summary stats over here if you're looking for the median, average, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's cool. You obviously can create your own custom watch list. Like, I'm obviously not an individual stock picker, but I know a lot of people do stuff like that. So it's really simple just to put that stuff in there, and you'll have all that data, for whatever you want. Yeah,
awesome. And once again, just YCharts is very powerful, but we have this Excel add-in. We know that a lot of people prefer to work in Excel and build their own models. So this is YCharts' way of, as Nick said, we're giving you the keys. You can export the data, use it in Excel, and use it however you want. Very cool. And so, Nick, you just mentioned that you're not much of a stock guy, but we do have tons of, North American stocks on the platform. And so let's talk a little bit about that workflow of just, you hear about a stock, you want to learn more. What do we do? Where do we go?
Yeah, so let's just use one of the things. Let's go with Apple to start. I think that's a popular one. So yeah, as I said, I may not be using a lot of this stuff that often, but there's tons of really good resources in here if you want to everything you want to see about ratios, market cap, all sorts of information there. You can go to key stats here. This is going to show a lot of those same pieces of information, which you can even export out. Shares outstanding, risk metrics, all sorts of stuff like that. In addition, I believe you can click on financials. That'll show you a lot of cool information as well. They're going to have, whether you want to do quarterly or annually, you have obviously an income statement here. You can see the balance sheet, cash flow statement as well. So a lot of stuff, if you're doing like individual stock analyses, trying to dig into fundamentals, trying to understand, what data is available here. They have this for all of these types of stocks. And yeah, you can see
Yeah.
there's so much stuff here. We could just sit and dig into this thing for a whole hour if we want to, right? We can talk about data, we can talk about estimates. You can do a key stats comparison. I've done this stuff before. So if you're doing this with right here has a bunch of looks like tech companies up here, AMD, Cisco. But yeah, you can just change whatever comparables you want. So if you wanted to get rid of all of those, we could just drop the entire things in there. You can drop FB, you can drop Amazon, Google, Netflix. And then just put those in there and let's just see what it looks like. And so now you're comparing, all of these stocks to each other. You can see when was the last high, you can see, okay, early January, there's some top. It looks like a couple of these stocks have also just peaked out a month ago. So interesting to see that. Tons of risk metrics. Always look at
estimates. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're an individual, stock person, this is really the way to go.
Yeah. And I'll just quickly show, because, we just use this search functionality in the top here, and that's great. I can type search for anything. If you don't know the ticker, you just know the name of the security. But I can also, say I'm looking here from the Apple point of view at Apple's key stats. We got this switch to symbol up here in the top. So let's go look at another thing. And it brings me to that same view, but just for a different security. So lots of time savers, lots of ways to just make it super easy, like we said, for you to educate yourself about a certain security when you're interested in learning more.
Yeah. And that's one of the key takeaways I want to say with everything I've been talking about today is there's an ecosystem of tools here, right? And so if one tool may not be able to do what you want, but if you use it in combination with other tools, you can do a lot of cool stuff. So for example, custom securities is cool on its own, but when you use that with model portfolios or dynamic model portfolios, you can really start to do cool stuff, right? Because you can be okay, I put in this, let's say you have private art data or something, or you have some sort of holding in your personal portfolio. Well, I want to put in my personal portfolio data, but I don't have any sort of value of my art or something. Okay, well then you create a custom security that's called Nick Maggiulli's art portfolio. And that's just valued at some point over time. And then you put that into a dynamic model portfolio, you put whatever allocation you had, and then it's going to reference that custom security in your dynamic model portfolio. So in theory, you can create a model portfolio out of completely all custom securities if you wanted to. And that's all going to be done. It's minor things you have to do in Excel to do that, but it's pretty straightforward. Can we actually go back to the Bitcoin security? I think it's on the middle tab there.
Yeah.
One more over. Yeah. So when you're referencing a security, when you're uploading data, you're going to want to reference that Y:1293. So for the ticker. So instead of, using, AAPL for Apple, you're going to use Y:1293. And so the system, when you're putting that in, it's going to read that as the ticker. And so it's going to say, hey, I need to allocate X% to this ticker over time. Right. So that's kind of how you reference those things in the system, which can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so I think those are the main things we want to talk about today.
Yep. And, we will turn it over to some Q&A. We've got some questions that came through while we've been chatting. So first question, I guess, when creating the custom security, for Bitcoin, will that update daily or not because its data was imported from Nick? Correct. So you're importing data and it will be as of that last date that you imported in your Excel file. So, that's a benefit of doing that every month, every quarter, maybe depending on what data you're looking at to keep that data fresh. A question for you, Nick, when did you start your portfolio? I'm assuming they mean about your personal investing history.
Yeah, I started in 2012. So I started investing around then. I've obviously, there's been a lot of back and forth. As I said, the allocations I tried to show earlier, a rough allocation, right? I used to be I was 20% bonds, and then I went 0% bonds, and then I was 15. I've been all over the place for a long time. So because of that, it's jumped around, but it's basically been in around about the 15% range on my bond allocation. I've had a little bit slightly more US than international, but just slightly, not too much. I've been pretty almost equally divided between US and, international plus emerging. I've obviously had gold and stuff in there. I now have art, which is not in there. I now have Bitcoin, which is not in there. So it's jumped around for over time, which is I think it's every investor's journey, especially when you're young. And I used to have individual stocks and stuff, but I've obviously stopped doing that.
It's a young man's game.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's also questions in the chat we may want to go over at some point because there's a lot of these. But yeah, I guess I don't want to, prioritize one over the other.
We'll take a quick, I'm looking at some of them as well. So someone asked, if you create a dynamic portfolio, can you edit that later if the model changes? And the answer is absolutely yes. So all you would have to do is just, let me go back to one of my portfolios here that is dynamic. We were running this experiment to kind of see, as we said, different rebalancing strategies, like, is that going to affect the performance of the portfolio over the long term? So this is a dynamic model portfolio. And when you go into your holdings tab, you can see these historical holdings here and all the times that we made allocation changes. But it's as easy as clicking edit holdings, and then I can upload a new file. And like we showed a second ago, that file is just 3 columns: your date, your symbol of whatever you want the holding to be, and then the target weight. And these are grouped by the date. So if I had 5 holdings, then I would list my date 5 times, and then each holding and my target weight. And when you upload this file, you can continually overwrite what the dynamic model portfolio is based on as your allocation changes into the future. It's a great question. Someone asked if we can revisit the Bitcoin security and just show how to make that again. So can jump back over to the Bitcoin security. And Nick, we did this in custom securities. And do you want to give just a quick narration of I mean, we showed it a second ago, but create new, you can give this a name, you can select your benchmark. And then again, it's just a simple data upload when you drop in.
Yeah, so I think he's probably more interested in the technical details of actually what I did to get, if you started BTC USD, downloading that file and then showing like the minor changes I had to make. It won't take too long. Yeah, all you had to do is just download this or click, I think, fundamental chart, and then you can download it. Or that works as well.
Right. So this is
from there. Yeah, from there you just have to rename the 2 columns and then just reformat the date as a date, like without the date time. So that's the only thing. So I would say, yeah, one's date, then value. It's very simple. So A1 would be date, and then B1 would be value. And then the only thing is I'd highlight column A and then just change the format on that to have the 4 on the year has to be 2021. So if you have long date, we have to change. So you have to actually change it. You can't do it. So yeah, I would just highlight it and just click format, but it's as simple as that. Just highlight that whole column, change the format. And then if you want, just to be clear, I always sort my data like ascending. So if it starts back in 2010 or 15 or wherever, with 2013 and goes forward.
Right.
So hopefully that answers that question. And trust me, when you upload it, it's going to say something's not right. Like even the little, if it's like, oh, it has its date is lowercase in A1, we'll then fix that. Make sure it's uppercase, something like that. It'll tell you what's wrong.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question related to, the cryptocurrency. So I'll just show here too, that we also have this similar price data for other crypto assets and a ton of different related metrics to these as well. Seeing a lot of traffic to these pages, obviously in 2021. So we've just continually added more cryptocurrency data to YCharts because it seems like y'all are interested in it. Okay, so there are a couple more questions. I'm not sure if do you have the ability to clone a model portfolio if you're trying to show a client comparison of their current allocation versus a new allocation without having to recreate from scratch? Yes, that's an excellent, another time-saving feature within YCharts. If I go to model portfolios, I'm looking at, this Bitcoin 2% allocation Bitcoin fund portfolio that Nick created. And with this dropdown, I can select duplicate among a whole other things of going to its quote page, generate a report, exporting its holdings straight to Excel. But if I click duplicate, I can just give this a new name, click duplicate, and then you see this one is calculating. Typically takes YCharts, a minute or two to run that analysis and then create this new model portfolio on the platform which is accessible through this search bar, just like any other security.
Yeah, and then you want to change, if you want the benchmark, in this case, the benchmark would be your old portfolio usually. So if your client was in a 60-40 originally, and then you clone the 60-40 and then change it, I would just make sure the benchmark is the original 60-40. So you always have like, here's your old, here's your new, here's how it would have performed over the past 5 years. Coronavirus is I think that's really the benefit of, that market crash, is like, now we can be like, well, how did it perform in the last year? Because that's indicative of risk assets. And we didn't really have a lot of the data doesn't even start till 2010, 2011. So a lot of the 08 stuff was not in there, but 2020 is in there for everyone. So that's really good. And why you can see stuff like this, for example, this is the 60-40 versus 60-40 with Bitcoin.
Yeah. Nick, one more question that I think definitely for you more so than me. So Jason asked, what are the considerations for when you deal within the interface versus exporting to Excel versus going to R Finance? Each one is more powerful, but also more involved than the previous. Where do you start to find limitations was a question.
Yeah, I think it's about what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to show performance comparisons, like simple like line charts or performance comparisons, drawdown charts, how things done, comparing one thing to another over time, YCharts is the easiest because it just saves me time. Otherwise, what I used to do before I even really understood YCharts, or I just used them for data, I would just download the data and then I manually had to go in there, import that data, format it, plot it against something else, right? And so it looks like my format, which is nice and all, but at the same time, that just takes so much more time. So there are certain posts where I literally just have YCharts throughout the entire post instead of me manually doing it. So when do I go and start doing my own thing is when I have to start making manual adjustments. For example, let's say I wanted to show, if I want to show growth of $1, growth of 10,000, YCharts does that. But if I want to do something that's like dollar cost averaging or something where I want to just be adding money over time, it's not easy to be like, hey, just add money over time. Or I want to add money at this date, in this date, in this date, right? So like when I did this chart that showed like Dogecoin, if you would put all the stimulus checks in, like there's no easy way in YCharts to say, okay, add $1,200 here, add $1,400 here, add $600 here. That's not possible. So at least not yet. So who knows? But that's where you're going to want to go and use R. So it's the function. The function dictates everything. So that's what I would say to answer that.
Gotcha. I heard you mention Dogecoin, so I just had to bring it up to either upset some people or please them. Also in YCharts.
Okay, let me see. I have another question. Do you utilize any of the technical chart functions when researching securities for your blog? So I'm not exactly sure what he means by technical. Does he mean like
within YCharts? Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really do too much technical charting, to be honest. I mean, I know people do it, but I've definitely not done too much of it. And if anything, anytime I've used this stuff, I've done it myself, like a 200-day moving average, but it's nice that it's in there. Like it's cool to see. You can see, you make all sorts of, adjustments and cool insights from that. But I generally just do that myself if I'm going to do that. But it's something I could always look into in the future.
Yeah. Oops. Okay. Oh, great. An anonymous question, but this is a perfect one I'm happy to talk about. Is there any work being done to allow for custom securities to be classified into an asset class so that allocation data in the model portfolio is available? Yes, that is happening. I know that our product team is working on it, where basically when you upload that data as a custom security, you'll have a series of drop downs. What's the asset class? What's the, what country does it belong to? So that when you look for a geographic exposure in YCharts, it could tell you that. So yes, that functionality is coming. We are actively working on it. Glad to hear that someone's interested as well. Okay, Nick, I think we will be coming up on time here, but thank you again, Nick, for sharing all of these insights. It's extremely valuable to see all the different ways that you're leveraging YCharts as you wear these different hats throughout a week. That's all the time that we have today. So you can find Nick's blog on ofdollarsandData.com, and you can also follow him on Twitter @dollarsanddata. And you can learn more about YCharts via YCharts.com. And if you mention of Dollars and Data to a YCharts team member, you will receive 20% off your first year's subscription. This is valid for new customers only, and you are on the clock through the end of June to take advantage of that deal. Nick, any last words for the people?
No, I don't really have too much else to say. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate your time. And just if you guys have any other questions, just feel free to DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open, so I always try to answer as many as I can. So just send me a DM.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Nick. This has been a blast. Thank you to everyone who joined, and be sure to join us next time on the next YCharts webinar. Thank you.